Did you know that 1 in 3 people who experience a mini-stroke will suffer a full-blown stroke within a year? And most never see it coming. For elderly women, the signs can be subtle, often mistaken for fatigue or aging, but missing them could be life-threatening. Imagine feeling a sudden wave of dizziness, struggling to form a sentence, or losing vision for just a moment. Would you ignore it? Many do, and that's the danger. A mini-stroke is the body's alarm bell, warning of something far worse ahead. But here's the good news. Recognizing the signs early can prevent disaster. Today, we'll uncover the 6 warning signs of a mini-stroke that you should never ignore, because knowing them could save a life. Watch closely, because one of these symptoms surprises even doctors. And if you've ever experienced anything like this, tell us in the comments below. Now, let's dive in. Margaret, a 72-year-old retired teacher, had always been sharp, independent, and full of life. Every morning she followed the same comforting routine, brewing a cup of her favorite chamomile tea and settling into her cozy armchair by the window. But this morning was different. As she reached for her cup, a strange sensation washed over her. The room seemed to tilt slightly. A wave of dizziness made her grip the armrest. She tried to brush it off. Maybe she just stood up too fast. But then, as she opened her mouth to call her daughter, the words didn't come out right. They were slurred, tangled, as if her tongue wasn't working properly. And for a few seconds, just a few, her right hand wouldn't move at all. The cup nearly slipped from her grasp. Then just as suddenly as it started, it was over. The dizziness faded, her speech returned to normal, and her hand worked fine again. Margaret exhaled, relieved. That was odd, she thought. Maybe it was just stress or dehydration. After all, she felt fine now. So, like many people do, she ignored it. Sudden, brief numbness or weakness. The silent red flag. Margaret barely noticed it at first. She reached for her teacup like she did every morning, but something felt off. Her fingers weren't gripping the handle properly. For a moment, her hand felt weak, almost disconnected from her body. It lasted only a few seconds, then everything was back to normal. No pain, no lingering effects. Just a strange, fleeting moment that she quickly shrugged off. But that moment was more than just an odd sensation. It was her brain's distress signal, a warning that something was blocking the blood flow to part of her brain, if only for a brief time. This is one of the most common signs of a mini-stroke, yet it's also one of the most ignored. Why? Because it's easy to dismiss. Think about it. If your arm or leg goes numb for just a few seconds, you might blame it on sleeping in a bad position or not having enough water. But weakness or numbness in the face, arm or leg, especially on one side of the body, should never be ignored. Even if it lasts only moments, it could be a transient ischemic attack, TIA. And that means a real stroke could be coming next. A mini-stroke occurs when a small clot or blockage temporarily stops blood from reaching part of your brain. That part of the brain is briefly starved of oxygen, causing sudden symptoms like weakness or numbness in one limb or even half the face. But since the clot clears quickly, the blood starts flowing again and the symptoms disappear. This can feel harmless, but here's what most people don't realize. A mini-stroke is not a one-time event. It's often a preview of a full-blown stroke waiting to happen. The problem is, people dismiss it as something minor and never seek medical help until it's too late. Margaret didn't think much of her brief weakness, but later that week, it happened again. This time, with her leg. She was walking to the kitchen when she felt her knee buckle slightly. Again, it passed quickly. But this time, her daughter noticed. Concerned, she convinced Margaret to see a doctor. That visit likely saved her life. The doctor confirmed that these episodes were actually mini-strokes, warning signs of something far worse on the horizon. With the right medication and lifestyle changes, Margaret was able to prevent a major stroke before it happened. If you or a loved one ever feels sudden weakness or numbness in the arm, leg, or face, even if it lasts only seconds, don't ignore it. Call your doctor immediately. A TIA is a medical emergency, and acting quickly can prevent a life-altering stroke. Have you or someone you know ever felt sudden weakness or numbness that disappeared quickly? Don't ignore these signs. Share your experience in the comments. Your story could help someone recognize the warning signs before it's too late. And if this video is helping you understand the risks, hit the like button to spread this vital information. Now, let's move on to the second warning sign, one that people often mistake for simple fatigue but could be a hidden danger. Temporary slurred or confused speech, a warning hidden in your words. Margaret had always been a great storyteller. She loved chatting with her husband over breakfast, sharing little memories and thoughts from the day before. But one morning something strange happened. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come out right. It was as if her tongue wasn't working properly. The sentence in her head sounded clear, but what came out was jumbled, almost like gibberish. Her husband looked at her, confused. "What did you say?" he asked. Margaret frowned. She tried again, slowly this time, but her words still felt slurred, like she had just come back from the dentist and the numbness hadn't worn off. After a few seconds, it passed. She laughed it off, saying she must be tired, but deep down, something felt off. What she didn't realize was that this was a warning sign of a mini-stroke, and like many others, she ignored it. When a mini-stroke occurs, a temporary blockage in the brain can affect the area responsible for speech. This can cause slurred speech, difficulty finding the right words, or even complete confusion. It might last only a few seconds or minutes, but it's a major red flag. In some cases, a person may know exactly what they want to say, but struggle to get the words out. Others may speak but not realize their words don't make sense. These moments of confusion are not just signs of being tired or having a brain fog. They could be early warnings of a major stroke. Slurred speech is often brushed off, especially in older adults. Many assume it's just part of aging, stress, or even dehydration. But here's the truth. Sudden speech problems are not normal and should never be ignored. Think of your brain like a power grid. If certain areas don't get the blood supply they need, even for a short time, they can't function properly. That's why speech may come out garbled, or thoughts may seem scrambled. The worst part, many people don't even remember the episode afterward. If no one else is around to notice, they may not realize something was wrong. That's why it's crucial for family members and caregivers to recognize the signs too. A few days after her first speech episode, Margaret had another one. This time, she was on the phone with her daughter. In the middle of the conversation, she suddenly started mixing up her words. It was subtle, but her daughter picked up on it right away. "Mum, are you okay? You don't sound like yourself." Margaret felt fine, but this time, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Her daughter insisted she see a doctor. That decision likely saved her life, because after a full checkup, doctors confirmed that these were mini-strokes, and without immediate action, a full stroke was likely coming next. What should you do? If you or someone you love suddenly experiences slurred or slow speech, words that don't make sense, trouble forming sentences, confusion about what's being said. Even if it lasts just a few seconds, take it seriously. Call a doctor immediately. A TIA is a medical emergency, and acting fast could prevent a full stroke. Have you or a loved one ever experienced sudden speech problems or moments of confusion? Don't ignore it. Share your story in the comments. You could help someone recognize the signs before it's too late. Now, let's move on to the next warning sign, one that's often mistaken for vision problems, but could actually be a silent alarm from your brain. Vision problems or sudden blurriness, when your eyes send a warning. Margaret was in the middle of her afternoon crossword puzzle, a routine she rarely missed. She reached for her pen, glanced at the next clue, and suddenly, the letters on the page blurred. She blinked a few times, thinking her glasses were smudged. She took them off, wiped them, and put them back on. But for a moment, she could barely see. It was as if someone had smeared Vaseline over one of her eyes. Then, just as quickly as it came, her vision cleared again. Margaret sighed in relief. Maybe it was just eye strain? She had been staring at the page for a while after all. But what she didn't realize was that this brief moment of blurred vision was a warning sign of a mini-stroke. Your brain and eyes are connected through delicate blood vessels that supply oxygen-rich blood to your optic nerves. When a mini-stroke occurs, a temporary blockage in these vessels can interrupt vision, leading to sudden blurriness, like looking through fog, double vision, seeing two overlapping images, partial or complete blindness in one eye, which may feel like a dark curtain coming down. Because the symptoms often last only a few seconds or minutes, many people assume it's nothing serious. But here's the truth. Vision disturbances are a major red flag that something is wrong with the brain. Most people don't associate vision problems with strokes. They assume it's just tiredness, dry eyes, or aging. But sudden vision loss, especially in just one eye, is actually a classic sign of a mini-stroke. Imagine a garden hose with water flowing through it. If something blocks the hose, even briefly, the water stops. That's exactly what happens to the blood supply in your brain during a mini-stroke. If the blockage happens in an area that controls vision, your sight is affected, even if only for a short time. A few days after her crossword puzzle episode, Margaret was at the grocery store. She turned to read a price tag, and for a brief second, her vision completely blacked out in her left eye. It lasted only a moment, but this time, she couldn't ignore it. Her daughter had already convinced her to see a doctor about her slurred speech, and now, with this new symptom, Margaret finally understood the urgency. The doctor confirmed that these episodes were mini-strokes, and if she hadn't come in, she was at high risk of a major stroke within weeks. That quick action may have saved her life. What should you do? If you or a loved one ever experience sudden blurry vision, double vision, partial or complete blindness in one eye, have you or someone you know ever had sudden vision problems that disappeared quickly? It might have been a warning sign. Share your experience in the comments. Your story could help someone recognize the signs before it's too late. Now let's move on to the next warning sign. One that's often brushed off as simple clumsiness, but could mean something far more serious. Dizziness or loss of balance, when standing up feels like the world is spinning. Margaret had just finished her morning tea. She stood up from the table, ready to rinse her cup, when suddenly the room tilted. For a split second it felt like she was on a boat rocking in rough waters. Her legs wobbled and she instinctively grabbed the back of her chair for support. A deep breath, a slow blink, and the feeling passed. She chuckled nervously. I must have gotten up too fast, she thought. Maybe she was dehydrated. Maybe she just needed to sit for a moment. But what Margaret didn't realize was that this brief episode of dizziness was a warning sign of a mini-stroke. Dizziness, lightheadedness, or a sudden loss of balance can occur when blood flow to the brain is temporarily disrupted. During a mini-stroke, this happens because a small clot briefly blocks oxygen supply to the part of the brain that controls balance. The interruption affects the inner ear and brainstem, which are responsible for keeping you steady. This can lead to a sensation of vertigo, unsteadiness, or even brief disorientation. Many people mistake this for simple dehydration, low blood sugar, or even just getting older. But here's the critical insight. If dizziness comes on suddenly, without warning, and disappears quickly, especially if it happens alongside other symptoms like weakness or slurred speech, it could be a transient ischemic attack or TIA, a mini-stroke that warns of a major stroke ahead. Most people don't take dizziness seriously. They assume it's from standing up too fast, a lack of sleep, or even stress. But when dizziness happens suddenly and without an obvious cause, it could be your brain signaling for help. Think of your body as a GPS system. When your car suddenly swerves, your GPS might say, recalculating. That's what happens in your brain during a mini-stroke. The balance center gets disrupted, causing a brief but noticeable moment of dizziness before the body recalculates and returns to normal. But if this warning is ignored, the next episode could be far worse. A few days after her morning dizziness, Margaret was walking to the mailbox when she stumbled for no reason. She didn't trip over anything. Her legs just didn't cooperate for a moment. Again, it passed quickly. But this time she remembered her doctor's warning. That afternoon, she called her daughter, who urged her to see a doctor immediately. After a series of tests, the results were clear. Margaret's symptoms were mini-strokes, and without immediate medical intervention, she was at high risk for a major stroke within weeks. That call may have saved her life. What should you do? If you or a loved one suddenly experience unexplained dizziness or vertigo, feeling like the room is spinning, brief loss of balance or coordination, stumbling or unsteady walking, have you ever had a moment where you suddenly lost your balance or felt the world spinning, but it passed quickly? Don't brush it off. Share your experience in the comments. Your story could help someone recognize the warning signs in time. Now, let's move on to the next warning sign, one that's often mistaken for simple fatigue but could be a dangerous signal from your brain. A sudden, unexplained headache, when pain is a warning. Margaret had always dealt with the occasional headache, stress, not drinking enough water, or even just staring at her crossword puzzles for too long. She knew the usual causes. The headache came out of nowhere. One minute she was reading her favorite novel, and the next it felt like a heavy pressure pressing against her forehead. It wasn't sharp like a migraine, nor was it the dull ache of a tension headache. It felt strange. She rubbed her temples, drank some water, and waited for it to pass. And just like that, it did. She shrugged it off. Maybe she needed a nap. Maybe it was just one of those days. What Margaret didn't realize was that this sudden headache was actually a mini-stroke warning. Unlike migraines or regular headaches, a mini-stroke headache is often sudden, unexplained, and different from any headache you've had before. When a mini-stroke, TIA, occurs, it can trigger a headache because a temporary blockage in a blood vessel reduces oxygen flow to the brain, triggering pain. The sudden change in blood circulation can create a pressure-like sensation rather than a throbbing pain. The affected area of the brain may not process pain normally, making the headache feel odd or unfamiliar. Most mini-strokes don't cause pain at all, which is why they are so often ignored. But when a mini-stroke does cause pain, it's usually a headache that comes on suddenly and feels different from normal headaches. Headaches are common, especially as we age. That's why many people don't take them seriously. They assume it's from dehydration, stress, or fatigue. But if a headache appears out of nowhere, feels unusual, or is accompanied by other symptoms, like dizziness, vision changes, or weakness, it could be a red flag. Imagine your brain sending you an urgent notification, like a phone alerting you to a low battery. A mini-stroke headache is your brain's way of saying, something is wrong, pay attention. Ignoring it could be a deadly mistake. The next day, Margaret's headache returned, but this time her vision blurred slightly, and she felt lightheaded. That was when she remembered something her doctor had once told her. If you ever have a sudden, unexplained headache that feels different from normal, especially if it comes with dizziness or vision problems, don't wait. Get help immediately. This time, she didn't ignore it. She called her daughter, who rushed her to the hospital. After a few tests, doctors confirmed she had experienced multiple mini-strokes in just a few days. If she had waited any longer, she could have suffered a major life-altering stroke. But because she acted fast, doctors were able to put her on treatment immediately, preventing a much worse outcome. If you or a loved one suddenly experience a headache that appears out of nowhere, a headache that feels different from normal, pressure in the head instead of throbbing pain, a headache accompanied by dizziness, slurred speech, or vision problems, have you ever had a sudden, unexplained headache that felt different from normal? Did you brush it off or seek help? Share your experience in the comments. You might help someone recognize the signs before it's too late. Now, let's move on to the final warning sign, one that's often ignored but could mean the difference between life and death. Brief memory lapses or confusion when the brain glitches. Margaret had always prided herself on her sharp mind. She loved reading, doing crossword puzzles, and remembering little details about her grandchildren's lives. But that afternoon, something odd happened. She walked into the kitchen to put the kettle on, but the moment she got there, she froze. She stood still, staring at the counter. What was I about to do? For a few seconds, her mind was completely blank, like a light switch had been flicked off. Then, just as suddenly, it came back. Oh, right, T. She shook it off, chalking it up to normal forgetfulness. But what Margaret didn't realize was that this brief moment of confusion was actually a mini-stroke warning. Why does this happen? Memory lapses and confusion during a mini-stroke occur because a temporary blood flow disruption to the brain prevents normal thinking processes. The brain experiences a brief power outage, causing a sudden loss of clarity or awareness. If the blockage affects areas responsible for memory or decision-making, you might struggle to recall simple things, even for just a moment. Key insight: unlike normal forgetfulness, which happens gradually with aging, mini-stroke confusion comes on suddenly and resolves just as fast. One moment, you feel lost or disoriented. The next, everything seems normal again. This is why it's often dismissed as nothing serious. But if your brain is temporarily glitching, it's a sign that a bigger problem could be coming. The dangerous mistake people make. Many people mistake these brief memory lapses for normal aging, stress or being tired, or a simple senior moment. But here's what most don't realize. Memory loss from aging happens gradually. You may forget where you put your keys or struggle to recall a name, but the memory eventually returns. With a mini-stroke, confusion or forgetfulness happens suddenly and disappears quickly. This is a major red flag that something is wrong. Margaret's wake-up call. A few days after her kitchen episode, Margaret was out shopping with her daughter. They were at the checkout when the cashier asked for her credit card. Margaret reached into her purse, then froze. For a moment, she had no idea where she was or why she was holding her wallet. She looked at her daughter, confused. Then, after a few seconds, everything snapped back into place. She laughed it off, embarrassed. "I must be getting old." But her daughter didn't laugh. "Mum, we need to see a doctor." That appointment may have saved Margaret's life. Tests confirmed that her episodes of forgetfulness were actually mini-strokes. If she had ignored them, she was at risk for a major life-threatening stroke within weeks. If you or a loved one suddenly experience a brief moment of confusion or disorientation, forgetting what you were doing in the middle of a task, feeling lost in a familiar place, even for a few seconds, struggling to recognize someone or something briefly, have you ever experienced a sudden, unexplained moment of forgetfulness that felt different from normal? Did you brush it off or seek help? Share your experience in the comments. Your story could help someone recognize the warning signs before it's too late. Follow the FAST test. The FAST test is an easy way to recognize a stroke or mini-stroke in seconds. Here's how it works. Face drooping. Ask the person to smile. Does one side droop? A lopsided or uneven smile is a telltale stroke symptom. Arm weakness. Ask them to raise both arms. Does one drift downward? Weakness on one side is a red flag. Speech difficulty. Have them repeat a simple sentence. Do they slur their words or sound confused? Even brief trouble speaking is serious. Time to call emergency services. If you notice any of these signs, even if they disappear, call for emergency help immediately. Don't wait, don't hesitate. Every second counts. Mini-stroke symptoms vanish quickly, making them easy to dismiss. But just because they disappear doesn't mean you're safe. That's why you need to act fast. Even if symptoms last only a few seconds, treat it as an emergency. Call for help, go to a doctor and get tested. It could save your life. If you or a loved one go to the hospital after experiencing mini-stroke symptoms, doctors will likely perform brain scans to check for blockages, run blood tests to identify risk factors, and start treatments to prevent a full stroke from happening. This is why getting medical attention right away is critical. The sooner you act, the lower your risk of long-term damage. Margaret's story could have ended differently. But because she didn't ignore her symptoms, she got the treatment she needed. Her doctor prescribed medication to prevent clots and recommended lifestyle changes to keep her brain and heart healthy. Now she's thriving, and grateful she didn't wait. Her message to others: if something feels off, don't ignore it. I almost did, and it could have cost me my life. If you want to protect yourself or a loved one from strokes, learn the FAST test and teach it to your family. Know the 6 warning signs of a mini-stroke. Don't wait. Call for help immediately if symptoms appear. Time lost is brain lost. Every second counts. The most important thing Margaret learned: Up to 80% of strokes can be prevented. Yes, some risk factors, like age and genetics, are out of our control. But there are powerful lifestyle changes that can dramatically reduce the risk of a stroke. Her doctor gave her 4 life-saving steps that she followed immediately. If you or a loved one have had a mini stroke or want to prevent one, this is what you need to do. Step 1. Control blood pressure, the #1 stroke risk factor. High blood pressure silently damages blood vessels, making strokes more likely. Many people don't feel symptoms, so check your blood pressure regularly. If it's consistently above 130/80, talk to your doctor about lifestyle changes or medication. What Margaret did, she started checking her blood pressure every morning and reduced her salt intake. Within months, her numbers improved. How often do you check your blood pressure? Let us know in the comments. Step 2. Manage diabetes and cholesterol. Protect your arteries. High blood sugar can weaken blood vessels over time, increasing stroke risk. Too much bad cholesterol, LDL, leads to plaque buildup in the arteries, restricting blood flow. Regular checkups and a healthy diet help keep these numbers in check. What Margaret did, she cut back on processed foods and started eating more fiber-rich meals like oatmeal and vegetables. Step 3. Stay physically active. Even small moves matter. Regular movement keeps blood flowing smoothly and reduces clot risk. You don't need intense exercise. A 30-minute daily walk is enough to lower stroke risk. What Margaret did, she started walking 20 minutes every morning and added light stretching before bed. How do you stay active? Drop your favorite exercise in the comments. Step 4. Avoid smoking and excess alcohol. Hidden stroke triggers. Smoking damages arteries, making it easier for blood clots to form. Excess alcohol raises blood pressure, increasing stroke risk. Quitting smoking and limiting alcohol can cut stroke risk in half. If you found this helpful, hit like. It helps more people see this life-saving information. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. You never know who might need this warning today. Want more expert tips on senior health and aging well? Watch our next video here.